Yo, bro. Hope you're doing well. I'm still at my current background, and I'm thinking about going back to the original background because it's where I made my first video, and I've kind of stuck to it really. But anyways, going back to the main topic of our video, the consequences of pornography for both men and women. Now, the reason why I'm doing this video for women as well is because, as far as I know, porn addiction and the problem of pornography for women is not being talked about enough. As far as for men, it's talked about a lot. A lot. But for women, not as much as I'm hoping. And the three major things I want to talk about in this video are how it affects your mental health, the feeling of shame and how it ruins your overall character, and the third thing is the comparison. I'll talk about that lastly. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the mental health aspect of being addicted to pornography and watching porn. Now, when you're watching porn, when you're doing the deed, when you're choking your chicken, when you're flicking the bead, you get this really intense feeling of pleasure. Tons and tons and tons of dopamine is being driven into your brain. It feels amazing. You've got all this access to this type of content, and it's thrilling. It feels amazing when you're doing it. But when you finish, and when you get that feeling of post-nut clarity, you feel like shit. You think to yourself, why did I do this? I just wasted tons of my time. I could be doing so much more rather than jerking off or watching this type of content. And it just really destroys you mentally because let's say you don't fap for 3 days. You get extremely horny, and I mean extremely horny, and you're constantly thinking about it. You're constantly thinking about, oh, I've not fapped for 3 days. I've not masturbated. I've not watched porn for 3 days. Let's continue it. Let's continue it. I don't want to fap today. I don't want to fap today. It's like a full-time job. You want to forget about it, but you're constantly reminded of it, which is, I feel like, the biggest challenge of pornography addiction is, well, one, trying to forget it, and two, making yourself busy with something else. Let's say it's some work you're really passionate about. Let's say it's school, or it can be anything else. Just try and get distracted from it. Distract yourself from the thoughts. Because once it goes into your mind once, it's very hard to get out. And there are some things that might trigger this thought. Let's say you're on Instagram, you're on your Reels page, and you see a half naked girl shaking her ass, or just softcore porn. That might trigger you. Or let's say you're on the app or website that you watch porn on. Let's say it's Twitter, or it's Reddit, or Rule 34, or these other websites or apps that you use to watch porn that give off that trigger. Or let's say it's 3 p.m., no one's home, you're bored out of your mind, and you get that trigger of, let's watch porn. Or, for instance, let's say you've just woken up, it's quiet, it's early in the morning, let's say 5, 6 a.m., and then you get that trigger. You get that trigger immediately. Let's watch porn. And it's very hard and very tough to change that. I've personally changed it well. I've done great progress on it, but I'm still working on it, obviously. I still do fall victim to this disease, to this defecating and mind destroying disease. And the few ways that I've managed to deal with it are get closer to God and just stay consistent on the good habits. And use my time so properly that I don't even have time to jerk off. And that's all I have to say about the first point. Now, the second point is the shame aspect of it. Now, what is shame? Well, shame is that feeling of when you do a bad habit that you know is bad for you, that you know is harmful towards your mental or physical health, or both, but you still end up doing it anyways, besides the consequences. And in this case, with watching porn, you know it's bad, you know the detriments to porn. I mean, there are tons. It can cause erectile dysfunction. It can desensitize you to normal sex. It'll make you act weird. Or make you act like a creep around the opposite sex. It can turn you into a cuck, which is where you get aroused at the thought of two people going at it instead of you going at it with your significant other. It can also cause infertility and varicocele. Varicocele is basically where the veins in your balls, I'm pretty sure, tangle up and feel like a bag of worms. And to see if you have varicocele, what you do is you obviously grab your hand and feel the veins that go up to your balls. Now, if you feel one or two veins, then that's very normal. You don't have varicocele. But if you feel down there and it feels like a bag of worms, then you might have varicocele. And in that case, I'd suggest you to go to a doctor for that. I'd suggest you to go to a doctor before things get serious. Now, this is a pretty sensitive topic, but it's for the good of the people. And personally, when I've done this test to see if I have varicocele, alhamdulillah, as far as I know, I don't have varicocele. Which is a good sign because varicocele can cause infertility, which is where you are unable to have babies and make a family. And going back to what I was saying, the shame aspect of it is really, really hard and really detrimental. That feeling of shame that you have when you know watching porn is bad, but you still do it anyways because you're addicted, is such a horrible feeling, and it gives off very terrible energy. Actually, in the energy spectrum, it's the lowest energy. Shame is the lowest, which goes to show how awful it feels to have shame and how bad the energy of having shame is. It feels horrible, it feels terrible, and I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. Now, the last thing, and probably the most important consequence about pornography, is the comparison aspect of it. Now, what I mean by this is, personally, I've had this, and I know that many other men have had this issue as well. You're watching porn, when you're done with your with your meat beating session, and after that, you just think to yourself, "Wow, why is my meat not as big as this guy's meat, or not as thick as this other guy's meat?" And it just creates this comparison in your mind, which just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It might rub off in your gym progress. Maybe you've made good progress in the gym, but you're constantly seeing men on Instagram with Olympia level physiques or just godlike physiques, and you're thinking to yourself, why is my physique not as good as his? and it just creates this mentally destroying mindset in your brain. And even with women as well, when they're watching porn, they're probably thinking to themselves, why are my tits or my breasts not as big as this actress? Or why is my butt not as big or as well shaped as this other actress? And it just, it spirals into even worse comparisons and comparisons and comparisons until it just mentally destroys you. It saps your energy away. It's mostly you can think about that comparison aspect, and as well as that constant reminder of I'm on day blank of nofap, I've not watched porn or masturbated for this many days, which is probably the worst advice I could give you on quitting this addiction. Counting the amount of days that you've not fapped. Just don't count the days because it'll make it even worse. And the shame of it will be even worse when you do eventually relapse. Let's say you've counted, you're etching it on your wall like a fucking madman that you're on day 10 of nofap. You've not watched porn for 10 days. And when you do relapse, that feeling of shame is so much worse and hits so much harder when you think to yourself, I've been on nofap for 10 days, I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm never gonna quit, blah, 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 da, da, da. It just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. Honestly, porn addiction is one of the worst things that has happened to me in my life and to other people's lives as well. It can ruin marriages, relationships, your character, your mental, your physical. It just ruins you completely. And I hope this video benefited you, even in the smallest amount. Even if I've benefited you this much, I've done my job. I've done my job, and I appreciate my supporters and the people who are watching my videos and are supporting me. My love goes out to all of you. And as always, I love you, I support you. Now get out of here.